For 15 years now, sex and women's pleasure have been part of the conversation on television. TV series have been transformed thanks to the rise of various female leads who embody a multiplicity of sexualities. The emergence of these complex and complicated heroines are revealing major changes in our society. They become examples that help us free our speech and our vision. Our heroine, Virginia Johnson, is a scientist who really existed. Performer-singer, divorced with 2 kids, Virginia turns her life around and goes back to school where she meets Bill Masters, a renowned gynecologist. He convinces her to get undressed so they can both start research that will lead to the sexual revolution. Virginia's biographer, Thomas Mayer, condensed her story and her discoveries in Masters of Sex. His book was turned into a TV series by showrunner Michelle Ashford, and it is the actress Lizzy Caplan who plays Virginia's persona for 4 seasons. Our heroine dares to speak about sex with an avalanche of complicated words. She accepts to get naked in the name of science. And she has many, many, many orgasms that she's happy to share with us.
What I found when I read the pilot, and then when I started reading more about Virginia Johnson, that we actually shared quite a bit in common. The way that she viewed sex and sexuality, primarily, that she was considered so modern, and to have these views, it's kind of shocking still today, but if it's compounded by the fact that it was in the 50s, and so she was a pioneer in that way.
For a woman who was sort of starting this career in her 50s, she was remarkably different from other women in that time period. And so I thought, well, that makes it very contemporary because she'll seem modern to us, which is one of the things we sort of need. You need a hook into a period piece so that it's relatable. Virginia's a really fascinating character, and as she said from the very beginning, this is true of the woman and the character that we're portraying, that she could separate sex and love. So she had many partners, and I think she had a robust and actually rather unapologetic approach to sex. These were radicals. These 2 did a remarkable thing and changed the way you live your life now.
Already in the 1950s, Virginia Johnson was examining fantasies and sexual taboos, our desires and our deepest fears. Behind the scientific discourse is a societal commentary, one about female pleasure and the myths that still surround it.
One of the first things that Masters and Johnson did was all this gathering of data. So simply watching and observing and measuring human bodies as they had sex.
She was the one who had the genius to come up with the therapies, and that she had the insight into human nature that was really the key to their success.
What I really love is that we got to bring these people sort of back to life, you know. It is true, if you go into Barnes & Noble and look at sex self-help books, you will still find their book. So it's not like they vanished in any way. But if you ask somebody who's in their 20s who were Masters and Johnson before our show came along, I think they would have had no idea, really. I mean, we have 2 sets of books. We have Tom's book, which is wonderful, and then we have their books. And their books are incredibly technical and actually really dry. So we can take a lot of the language from how they were talking about it. So there's a certain formality to it, of course.
The human female frequently is not content with one orgasmic experience during episodes of auto-manipulation involving the clitoral body. If there is no psychosocial distraction to repress sexual tensions, many well-adjusted women enjoy a minimum of 3 or 4 orgasmic experiences before they reach apparent satiation.
When she spoke about sexuality, she spoke as a clinician. She spoke in the professional terms.
We're seeing things that look very, very risque and carnal on screen, and yet it's all talked about with this, incredible medical sort of rigidity.
Had you heard those words on any other show before Masters of Sex?
No, really, honestly, the way we talked about sex was different from any other show I'd ever seen. Sometimes the technical discussions can get very embarrassing, clitoral stimulation and vaginal stimulation is. Sometimes people blush, I think.
There was talk about whether we should say clitoral or clitoral. I prefer clitoral. I think they both work. I think it's dealer's choice.
Yeah, I don't think the word clitoris is used very often. And I think if you do use it, when it's not in any way attached to like doctor's office or doctors, I think it's a little like, feels a little raw.
Clitoris. 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 Clitoris! Clitoris! Clitoris!
Thanks to Virginia Johnson, we can finally say that word on television. But to get there, the young woman had to give her body to science and even accept to put it in the hands of her boss, Bill Masters.
Virginia told me that she felt that if she didn't have sex with Masters as part of the job, that she wouldn't have the job. He would find somebody else.
It was a very, very, very big discussion about how they were going to embark on their sexual relationship, and we thought about it a million different ways. And then we came up with this, which was that out of the sheer joy of all of a sudden understanding that she was going to make a difference in the world, that she was going to be a pioneer, that she was going to lead the charge in the sexual revolution, that all that comes, that all of a sudden she realizes, we'll do it together, and I'm happy to do it this way, and I'm happy to be the guinea pig and experiment with you in trying to figure this out together. And I loved it because there was no design other than the sheer love of work and feeling excited by her own ambition.
I want to show you a clip of season 1, episode 6.
Yes, I remember this scene because Michael threw up. He had like food poisoning or the stomach flu or something. No, it wasn't stress. I like to pretend that it was a direct result of him touching my breast, but he had thrown up before that too, and after, but it was pretty funny.
It's like all the pressure of feeling forced as a woman to do things you don't want to do has fallen away, because all of a sudden he's seen her and says, you are good at your job, period. And all of a sudden the comfort and the relief and the exuberance of that moment allow her to go, you know what, I will do it. And it was actually an answer to the pilot where he says, part of your job description will be to experiment together. And she doesn't want to do it that way, because he's telling her essentially what women had been suffering forever, which is, if you want what you want out of this, you're going to have to sleep with me. And so the idea that we finally, 6 episodes later, or however long that was, we get to turn it around, so he gives her the recognition of her value without asking for sex, and then she can give it, because it's now on her terms.
For the showrunner, this sequence is about showing Virginia's empowerment. But for the actress, it's quite the contrary.
That scene kind of makes me sad to watch it, because yes, he's throwing her this bone of we're gonna be equals, but they're not really equals. I mean, of course they're not, because he has to be the one to even offer her this position. He's very much still her boss back in these days. And it almost feels like in doing this, she's caught up in the excitement of scientific discovery, of course, but she's also rewarding him for giving her this opportunity. And the only way that she's capable of rewarding him is by giving over her body, which feels like this total dichotomy happening at once. It's like this strong feminist move, but also it's the complete opposite.
Not even trying to make sex look sexy. Sex is sometimes just inherently very beautiful. And to let that be, when it happens that way, honestly, then we just let it go.
The TV series demonstrates how sex can be tinged with ambiguity. especially when power infiltrates sexual relations. Bill's knowledge comes from biology books. Virginia draws her conclusions from her personal experiences. The clash between these two approaches generates a power struggle in the Season 2 episode, The Fight.
He sort of takes off my robe, and I have no clothes on underneath, and then I have to like fully stand there across from him and like masturbate to completion. That was not a fun day, but like, suck it up and you get it done. I believed in what we were trying to say with the story. It was absolutely about power in that moment and about something so much bigger than just that. And I trust our directors and our producers so much to not, you know, take it to a point of gratuitous nonsense. So even though I remember sitting in my trailer thinking like, oh, I really don't want to do this today. I would rather do just about anything else except stand in front of a crew of people totally naked and pretend to masturbate, but I also believe in the story. So, and I'm really proud of that episode.
I don't think you should have to show your body to millions of people if you don't want to. I mean, I completely understand it. So you realize, yes, it matters. It means something to actually show yourself. And I think the scary thing is when it means nothing.
Virginia Johnson herself was unbelievably comfortable in her own body, and I felt that I had no right signing on to play this part if I wasn't going to represent that side of her. I think it's part of the benefit of having a female showrunner. She's not interested in nudity for nudity's sake, or, oh, it's been a few minutes so we should show somebody naked. It's moving the story forward, and specifically in this show, it's about exploring relationships and intimacy through the lens of sex and sexualities.
Absolutely. Women will show sexual women in a different way than men will. Absolutely. They just will because it's their personal experience of it. And so, yeah, so it's been great. I mean, I love the fact that there's so many women coming into television. It's really exciting. Can you hold on a sec? Yeah. Is it on the set?
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Lizzy has a line that she wanted to cut.
Well, what's that?
I don't know.
Well, is in scene 28?
Yeah.
Get ready for a wedding. She goes to the door. She looks at Master's office, and there, he's absorbed. She decides not to tell him what she's just heard. Hey, can I rehearsal?
A remarkable thing is going on. It's because television has just exploded, and it's allowed women to do what I do, you know, run shows, create shows in a way that just has not been seen before. I mean, there's just much more room for women to write and direct and run their own shows. And by the way, once you're running your own shows, you're imparting your own vision.
Should I watch it now?
Yeah.
Proof that that's something we should investigate.
Here's another question. Why can some women orgasm without any genital stimulation whatsoever?
Can they?
Jane can. Jane can orgasm just having her breasts touched.
That I find hard to believe.
You don't have to, because we could test it here. Couldn't we?
We could.
If there was a woman on the road who could orgasm by putting a Q-tip in her ear, and there was a woman tonight who wrote on her questionnaire that she could climax while brushing her teeth.
Sexual pleasure via good hygiene.
Virginia gave a lot of herself so that we can understand the female orgasm, a mysterious mechanism that we will try to elucidate.
Well, in the 50s, Freud and the impact of Freud's theories were at the height.
I didn't know that at that time everybody was listening mainly to Freud when it came to women's bodies, and he was so far off the mark.
There was the idea of two different types of female orgasm.
They started to differentiate between a vaginal orgasm and a clitoral orgasm.
Clitoral orgasm is reserved for immature women, for girls, and a vaginal orgasm is for grown women. Masters and Johnson found out that it's actually the same mechanism at work. It makes no difference where you're getting it from.
A number of the things that Freud was saying and that so many people were taking as fact were in fact not true.
The vaginal orgasm is a Freudian myth, since it's always the clitoris that triggers the female orgasm, whether it's stimulated from the inside or the outside.
And I will say that In our writer's room, and when we first started was 2013, I guess, in terms of our writer's room, people were confused still. And it really required understanding the anatomy of women. And so that was one of the things that was genuinely confusing about literally how all the parts worked. We actually learned something from the work that they had done. Even in this age when you think everybody knows everything about sex, we realized they were incredible pioneers.
The other thing that they found, among many things, is that men would have the single firecracker, whereas women were capable of fireworks. That was a very dramatic finding, because essentially it showed that women were not the weaker sex. It showed that some of the basic things of religion, of Freud, so much of the cultural underpinnings of the relationship between men and women was false. And it was truly revolutionary.
As you'll see, we even have it in this season where women are just saying, this is what I want, do it, because it feels good, period.
There's not as clearly as much of a stigma or as much shame attached to a woman taking ownership of her own body. But yeah, at that point for Bill and Virginia, the idea of a woman being able to get anything done on her own without a man was groundbreaking, but especially something like her own sexual pleasure. It is this idea that like the orgasm you can give yourself is as valid as the orgasm you get from your husband. That is a brave new world, and I do think we're a lot closer now than we were then.
Certainly women can do it alone. You can. Do women want to do it alone? That's a very, very individual question.
I think Masters and Johnson were somewhat horrified by the monster that they had helped create of the sexual revolution, where people were just having sex without any type of emotional connections. That's not what they expected. That's not what they were. The purpose of their work was not that.
Masters and Johnson ended up being cutting edge by going back to a very basic idea, which is people will always couple, people will always marry, people will always procreate. And ultimately that becomes in a weird way the radical idea, which is that a certain traditionalism will always come back.
Even if Virginia Johnson has proved that it's easier for a woman to achieve orgasm by herself, Michelle Ashford's story finishes with the idea that happiness can only be found if you are two. The series that had started as one of the most progressive shows leaves us with a very conservative message.
In the long run, being able to separate sex and love, and actually almost always separating sex and love, I think our show will come down in the camp of saying that actually is a dangerous path if it's always separated, because ultimately the greatest kind of, most fulfilling kind of sex is quite often a union of feeling and physicality.
It's interesting, this season Virginia is getting a lot more. She finds herself at the end of the season in a much more traditional setup and one by her own design, which even that seems groundbreaking for her because she was so resistant to that.
But we are getting into the point in the story where Virginia actually makes a decision that I think takes into consideration how her children are viewing her. I do think she did care about that ultimately, that she knew that that her children were paying a price for not only what she did for her job, but also how she was living her life. I think it haunted her, to be honest.
I think her story really talks not only about the freedom of sexuality, but also some of the consequences and love and respect, but also child rearing and all the type of burdens that can also come with the freedom of sex.
The questions that are brought up for her personally in the show are still, I have these conversations with my friends who are working mothers today. This idea of juggling family and your professional purpose, do you have to pick between the two of them? Is it possible to do both without letting down both sides of that equation? And it seems unbelievably modern, this question.
There's no greater judgment that comes down on women with regards to how are they as mothers. And so if you take a very sexual woman and you put her with children, yes, I think people are really hard on that.
For some, motherhood is a blissful state, and feminism is a label to be proud of. For Virginia Johnson, things are more complicated. Not everyone can be Beyoncé.
One of the reasons why Virginia is so incredible to me as a character to play is that her work and her life has helped the feminist cause tremendously, but she herself would never identify as a feminist. I mean, the truth is she really didn't even like other women that much.
I asked Virginia about being a feminist, and she just didn't like having that label. But in reality, she was a remarkable feminist. I just think she was such an independent spirit that it defied labels. She didn't want to be labeled.
I love the fact that she didn't identify as a feminist. It didn't really matter. And what I love about the contradiction of her saying, I don't march with the ladies, which was a direct quote, I don't march with the ladies, and the fact that her work was so revolutionary for women, I love that.
The word feminism, like the stink is coming off of it more and more every day. I can't... There are still women in the public eye who refuse to identify as feminist, which is crazy to me because it's just misinformation. The definition of feminism is that you just want equality. America is still a pretty puritanical country, and obviously we're leaps and bounds ahead of many other countries in terms of women's rights and the ability of women to express themselves or their sexuality. We're doing okay, but we're nowhere near the point where I would assume we would be at, and I think the point that Virginia Johnson probably assumed we'd be at by 2016.
Series created by women and starring women has become a way to resist conservatism and to keep pushing new boundaries.
There can be a niche, a certain area of television that is really edgy and bold and taking chances.
It's a very exciting time for television, period. It's always been, I think, the better format for women. Women's roles in films are still not where they need to be, especially in comedy, but there's always been a place for women in comedy in television. And because you have so much more time to tell your story, you're not relegated to this, hour and a half, 2 hour period where most of the stories are about men and their journeys and the women are just kind of peppered throughout, which of course drives me insane.
I think we've seen all sorts of portrayals now, and certainly it will continue this way for a while, of women in all sorts of, the lead character of Transparent, of course, is a fairly radical version of womanhood.
And yes, the more strong, empowered female characters that we can see on screen, the better. I also just think for people in general, but because women are more underrepresented than men in film and TV, the more examples of different types of women we could show, then the better chance we have of these people identifying with something that they're seeing on screen.
I think what is sort of remarkable about the time we're living in is you can decide to do it any way you want. And now there's sort of at least much more societal support for that. If you're a woman and you just say, I don't want to have anything to do with a normal coupling or a marriage or anything like that, you can do it. And I think that's what's exciting, is that you don't have to do it the normal way. Do a lot of women want to do it the normal way? Find a man, settle down, get married? Yeah, they do. So I think what freedom means is that you can just choose your path and not be judged for it.